INDI 9, action. Hi Raj,
Hi Jay,
how's it going?
all's good, all's good.
We are rolling.
Good to be back in Delhi.
Yes. I've been in Delhi for like 5 days now.
Yeah, and you've also been a father for about 10, 11 days now.
Yes.
How does that feel?
Amazing.
All right, so without, wasting much time, let's get to the core of the issue.
Yeah.
Today we have a very interesting topic at hand. We are going to be discussing the modern day politics of Punjab, its linkages with the K word,
Yes.
that is the Khalistan word, and its association with the history of the Sikhs, the history of the British Raj, and the impact it has on modern India. So, Jay, let's get your thoughts on the issue. Opening remarks.
So, another thing that I want to convey to the audience is that we would be dividing this episode in two parts because the issues and the literature on this particular concept and idea is extensive.
Yeah, first off, a complex issue requires and warrants complexity in communication,
Yes.
complexity in delivery,
Yes.
and a tribute has to be paid to every source of information which we have consulted in the process of making these episodes. So that's why it's going to be a long drawn conversation. As a result, we will be splitting it into two
Two
conversations.
episodes, yeah. So we should start from the the two Anglo-Sikh wars that happened after the death of Maharaja Ranjit Singh. That is mid 19th century, and the Britishers realized that the Sikhs were extremely competent fighters, and the soldiers that the Britishers used were mostly drawn from the Bengal native infantry, and these soldiers were extensively drawn from places like Bihar. In fact, we've had our ancestors fight for the Bengal native infantry. We come from Bihar, so there is strong evidence to show that people from our villages joined the British forces in their colonial exploits, and eventually the Punjab region that we know of today, which is divided between India and Pakistan, was subjugated by the colonial masters. And after that, they realized that this new area that they're dominating needs to have its specific identity, because Sikhism in general, even though it evolved out of India, it evolved out of dharmic practices and it drew a lot of inspiration from ancient Vedic traditions. It was still very autonomous and reformative in nature, which inadvertently derived its separate identity of sorts, which the British obviously exploited.
Yeah, I mean, for good reason or for bad reason, that is up to opinion and a subjective debate. But at some point in history, a wedge came in between a Hindu identity and a Sikh
Sikh
identity,
identity.
and it continues
It
till
happens
date.
with every orthodox tradition, which becomes extremely rigid. There is a reformative movement against the rigid practices, and this wasn't there in just Punjab. It was there in North India in the form of the Bhakti movement. It was there in the South Indian states as well, obviously in the form of Bhakti movement. You had the Alvars and the Nayanars who were basically prophesizing Shaivism and Vaishnavism beyond the domination of the Brahmins. You had the Lingayats in Karnataka. So Sikhism can also be viewed from that aspect itself, as it was a reformative movement which was drawing a lot of influence from Islam and ancient Sanatan Dharma as well.
Right. And going forward, we have a identity of the Sikhs which becomes which draws very proud historical linkages from the Sikh kingdom that used to occupy
Yes.
large areas of present day Indian Punjab, Pakistani Punjab, parts of
Uttar Pradesh,
uh,
Western Uttar Pradesh, what we know as Harit Pradesh. Haryana,
Himachal Pradesh,
Haryana.
Haryana,
Yes,
all
yes,
these lands. So it was
yes.
a very large,
It was a
large kingdom.
large kingdom, and it had the Sikh identity was heterogeneous. It wasn't a unitary identity, because the problem with the modern Western concept of identity was that it viewed everything from a singular unit, which made it extremely difficult for British to fathom the idea that even under one umbrella term there were so many disparate groups, and that is what eventually led to the formation of various Sikh revivalist groups in the late 19th century, and eventually led to the Shirmoni Gurudwara Prabandhak Committee, which is
Yeah,
popularly known as
I think that
SGPC.
at the time, before 1920s, there was a culture of Gurudwara administration being headed by the Mahants,
Yes,
which was replaced by elected bodies like the SGPC
yeah,
to ensure the administration of Gurudwaras and regulatory activities of the Gurudwara committees.
yeah,
And naturally, the management of religious institutions later becomes a political issue. To this day, SGPC is a very active body and involved in religious administration of uh, gurudwaras, etc. So I think 1920s is where you see a formalization of uh, Sikh organizations,
absolutely.
and they start, an association develops with political organizations like the Akalis.
Akalis, yes. So with the SGPC, you had a lot of publications coming up front. There was one publication called the Sikh Rehat Maryada, and that publication eventually gave a definition of what a Sikh is. Finally, in 1973, and in that definition, they said that Sikh is a man or a woman who believes in the principles of the 10 gurus, believes in one god, so a monotheistic idea, which obviously they incorporated through various monotheistic religions, including Islam. Monoistic ideas from Vedic practices as well. So from that, so 10 gurus you have to follow. You have to believe in that one true God, and then you should also believe in the baptism of Guru Gobind Singh. That would be like the basic definition of Sikhism, which was published in the publication which was released by SGPC, and it is again drawing a lot from the older revivalistic Sikh movements like the Singh Sabha movement or the Tat Khalsa movement, which played a very important role in what would be prophesized as a true Sikh later on by the Sikh extremists under the guidance of Jarnail Singh Bhindranwale. Now coming back to the K word before you take over, Raj. The word Khalsa actually comes from an Arabic word Khalis, which means pure. Now it also has had a lot of various meanings throughout history. The pre-colonial meaning of Khalsa was the land which belonged to the kings, like the king's land, or Khalsa meant people belonging to the god or people of God. And in fact, in a lot of Sikh texts, the word for God is Padishah, which comes from Persian, obviously meaning king of kings. And they've mentioned that God, Vaheguru, is the Padishah, and the people of Vaheguru are Khalsa.
Right.
Eventually, the later interpretation, which was obviously used by the Sikh extremists, was that Khalsa means Sikhs and Khalsa Raj means the rule of the Sikhs and not the rule of the people of God. So a
Right.
lot of Sikh commentators, specifically the liberal-minded Sikh commentators who take into context the heterogeneous nature of Sikhism, would always say that the meaning of Khalsa is just and just people of God, and that could be anyone,
Right.
not just Sikhs.
Right. Interesting historical
Yeah.
context, Jay. I think when we speak of the Khalistan movement, when we speak of the idea of Sikh separatism, many prominent journalists in their records and in their studies have noted that not a lot of Sikhs are totally supportive of the idea of a separate Sikh country, but many of them express discontent against the Indian state for because of a feeling of historical injury. So I think there needs to be a more complexity on the average Indian's part
Yeah.
before understanding this issue, that not every Sikh expressing some discontent against the government of India or the Union of India always had secessionist
Tendencies.
ideas in mind.
Actually.
So let's begin to talk about areas where a historical injury started creeping in. So, speaking of historical injury, we know that erstwhile state of Punjab bore a huge brunt of the partition. Punjab was split into two, and over 150 plus Sikh shrines are left behind in Pakistan. Some of their most fertile land plains are left behind in Pakistan. A lot of their assets are left behind in Pakistan. So, look at it from a perspective of people leaving behind their homes, their businesses, their money, their real estate. These are all immovable kind of assets. You have a certain kind of social relevance in those western parts of Punjab which are partitioned. You are thrown away into an area that you necessarily would not have gone to until and unless such extreme violence started, which it did in the late 1940s during the time of the partition. So their integration into Union of India already starts with a painful history.
Yes.
And we start off with an injury. Good or bad, and whatever the Sikhs' attitude is today, that is a much later discussion. But there is no denying the fact that the Sikhs have faced some amount of historical injury. This is worsened in 1956 when the States Reorganization Act is happening, but Haryana and Himachal are kind of not totally split up
Not
from
split up
Punjab.
from Punjab, and
So the Punjabi Suba movement has picked up,
yeah.
and a linguistic, a demand for a separate state on the basis of a linguistic identity for Punjab is kind of left on hanging
Yeah, and it's
during the
finally,
state's
it's
reorganization
finally
act.
given in 1966.
Yeah.
Even because what had happened was that a lot of Punjabi Sikhs had expected Punjabi Hindus to mention in the census that Punjabi is their first language, but a lot of Punjabi Hindus ended up mentioning Hindi as their main language, which increased the levels of insecurity amongst the Punjabi Sikhs, where they felt that Punjabi language, which is unique in its own sense, written in the Gurmukhi script, would get isolated and eventually get extinct.
Right.
So, given that Tamil Nadu was already created, Andhra Pradesh was created, Karnataka and Maharashtra were created, and all these states were being created on linguistic lines, why couldn't Punjab get that level of autonomy or treatment? And then finally, Punjab was the last state which was organized on the lines of linguistic autonomy. And the Punjab that we see in the modern sense was carved out
In 1966.
in 1966,
which is
with the
where
Sikh
Punjab and
withdrawal.
Haryana were
Yeah,
split up.
were split up, and Himachal
So
Pradesh
Haryana
was-
was created in
Yeah, in
1966.
fact, what we need to acknowledge is that the Hindu kings of northern India always had a lot of tension with the Sikh kingdoms and the Sikh movement in general, because they were very terrified of their growing popularity. In fact, the Kangra Rajputs supported the Mughals in their campaign against the Sikh king. So the distrust between Sikh and Hindus is not something that happened during the time of the colonial masters. I feel the colonial masters just exploited historical rifts between the two communities.
Right. I think there were many other smaller aspects that add to historical injury, like see, Bluestar and the 1980s Sikh militancy comes much later. Even things like the road transport corporations industries were nationalized.
Yeah.
So that was a traditionally Sikh dominated business.
Yeah.
So this was another business that was crowded out.
Yeah.
This fact I've picked up from the book History of the Sikhs
Yeah.
by late
Khushwant
Khushwant
Singh.
Singh. So there were business interests which were compromised. This is a community that has already left behind its 150 plus shrines, fertile land plains, and now aren't even being allowed to participate in businesses
In fact,
which they are competent at.
to add to what you're saying, Virginia Dyke in her paper has gone on to say that it is alleged that Indira Gandhi was also trying to reduce the number of Sikhs in the Indian armed forces to proportional to the population of the Sikhs. So that was
Right.
also a grave injury, because Sikhs have historically been involved in the martial activities
Yeah, Sikhs
of the
have been
subcontinent.
disproportionately
Yeah,
represented in the
yeah.
army.
Specifically the Jat
Yeah,
Sikhs.
a fact which they are very proud of, and they
Yeah,
should be,
yeah,
because for a very small sect of
yeah,
population, they have given many of their sons to
yeah.
the defense and sovereignty and integrity of India.
Yes.
Yet, reducing their preference in the army
Mhm.
would add another final blow to an already accumulating set of
In fact,
injuries.
they were declared as a martial race by the British. There was that was another reason as to why the British ensured that there was a separate identity, because they wanted to create a set of loyal subjects under them. The Bengal Native Infantry, which also had its own sect of martial races, which also includes our community from Bihar, they were very, very distrustful to these communities now after the 1857 revolt. So around that time, they wanted to create more loyal subjects, and they found it in the Jat Sikhs. So after the 1857 revolt, when the Sikhs had resoundingly supported the British in their campaign against the North Indian revolts, they realized that through the Sikhs they can create a loyal subjects, which they had first found in the Bengal native infantry. In fact, if you read Mark Tully's book about Operation Bluestar and about Indira Gandhi's last battle in Amritsar, in that book he is very specifically mentioned that the reason why the Sikhs did not support the North Indian movement of a revolt against the British was because most of the Bengal native infantry was participating in that revolt, and they had themselves fought side by side the British and helped the Sikhs get subjugated by the British. So sorry, helped the British subjugate the Sikhs, and that is one of the reasons why they did not support the revolt in 1857.
Right. And I mean, post 1947, we see that the Sikhs are anxious about partition because they prefer a united India.
Yeah.
They prefer a united India because the idea of a separate Pakistan means that in Punjab they could be a minority against a Muslim state, or in India where they had some anxieties about being a minority against a Hindu state.
Yeah.
A lot of this anxiety, credit to Mr. Jawaharlal Nehru, I feel was from certain reading, it becomes easier to deduct that it was put to ease by Pandit Nehru when he assured that he sees nothing wrong with a sense of entitlement by the Sikhs for special considerations. So he promised certain kind of special considerations to the Sikh community, and that probably creates a certain sense of positive anticipation about merger with India.
Yeah.
However, they see a delayed response to the Punjabi Suba movement for a linguistic state. You are already losing incomes, losing livelihoods, and now you are at a certain 1% of the population. This, I feel like, is slowly building up to create a fertile environment for the development of a secessionist movement. You already have a cultural wedge drawn between Hindus and Sikhs. You have a sense of historical injury, and now you are in a border state with our western neighbor Pakistan,
Yeah.
obviously observing these issues.
Obviously.
And so a natural course of events perhaps became a
Yeah.
secessionist movement.
In fact, the death nail to the peaceful resolutions of, like, looking for autonomy was the clash that happened between Nirankaris and Damdami Taksal in 1978, which led to a lot of deaths on the Damdami Taksal side. And Damdami Taksal was like the Orthodox Sikh movement, which was being headed by Sant Jarnail Singh Bhindranwale. And after that, a more aggressive stance was taken by that movement in order to portray themselves as the true representative of this unitary Sikh identity, which was heavily dominated by the Jat Sikhs. Because the perception of Khatri Sikhs being the true Sikhs is still considered to be like a rarity amongst the Jat Sikhs. Obviously, in a jocular sense, but there is obviously this sense of domination in the communities that the Jat Sikhs are like the true flag bearers
The
of
Sikh
Sikhism. Even
community.
though it's quite ironic because Guru Nanak Ji was Khatri himself, so I don't know where that's coming from.
Speaking of that, let's take a dive into the caste dynamics of Punjab.
Yeah.
There are also a significant number of Majhabi Sikhs
Yes.
who have probably been discriminated against in many
Heavily.
ways, and probably because
Kanshi Ram,
of
the person who started Basapa, was a Mazhabi Sikh from Punjab.
right,
Yeah.
and these issues get worsened when you are already speaking of an interference by Pakistan.
Yeah.
You have people from lower caste communities who are probably getting discriminated in their places of work, in places of worship, and the population demographic of present day Punjab indicates that there is a significant number of Dalits and
31.6%.
scheduled caste individuals and Majhabi Sikhs who live there.
Yeah.
So maybe their perspective is a kind of subaltern perspective that we may overlook while evaluating the Khalistan struggle, the struggle for a separate Punjab. What are your thoughts on that? Have we covered anything? Have we come across anything while reading up on these issues?
Like their perspective?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to give you a very recent example, when the farmers' protests were at their peak 2 years ago on the Singhu border, there was this one incident where some Nihangs had amputated one man and and just like stuck his dead body on a police barricade. Turns out that that man was from the Mazhabi Dalit community, and he was just accused of dishonoring the Guru Granth Sahib, even though there was no evidence to that.
Right.
So even till this date, people from the Dalit community under the Sikh pantheon umbrella are facing so much discrimination, and that is after one of the key distinguishing factors put forward by SGPC and a lot of other Sikh spiritual leaders in the early 20th century to distinguish themselves from Hinduism was that they do not believe in caste. But that is not true, because caste still plays a very important role in the general political existence of the Sikhs.
Right.
Most of our friends, like from our personal opinion, most of our friends are Khatri Sikhs, and they always tell us that they never really identified with the Khalistani movement because they always associated it with the Jat Sikhs.
Right. Right. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Let's turn the clock back. You spoke about the incident in 1970s,
Yeah.
and
So from 1982 to 84, the Khalistani militants had started conducting a lot of attacks against any type of criticism that was coming their way. There
then
were
at the Golden Temple
yeah,
we have the killing or the assassination of a very senior official from the Punjab police,
yeah,
DIG Atwal,
yeah.
which I think is the reason that started the chain of events that led to the
It
Operation Blue
wasn't just
Star.
that assassination. We need to acknowledge that from 1982 to 1984, there were almost 400 people who were killed by these disparate armed factions who thought that were going against the diktats of Bhindranwale, and there were mutilations. You would see like bodies come out of the Golden Temple in like bags and sacks. So the militants themselves were disrespecting a place of worship.
So now
But
you have a
the
fortification of the Golden
yes,
Temple. You have militants abusing a very sacred place of worship with AK-47s,
rocket launchers,
ammunition, rocket
ammunition,
launchers, and now a fortification is already happening of one of the most holy sites for the Sikh community.
Akal Takht.
Yes, and so let's speak about that. Let's speak about the
So
events that led to.
before we talk about the fortification, we should know who General Shahbeg Singh is or was. General Shahbeg Singh was one of the most decorated war heroes of the 1971 war in East Pakistan, and he
I believe he
basically
retired as a major general.
he did, and he basically helped train the Mukti Bahini to fight against the Pakistanis in the Eastern Front. And later on, he was accused of corruption, and he was dishonorably discharged 1 month before his retirement.
Yeah, sorry, I'll correct myself.
Yeah,
He didn't retire as a major
yeah,
general. Right before retiring as a
retirement.
major general to become
Yeah,
eligible for the respectful rank and pension
pension.
and
He was
everything.
dishonorably discharged, and he felt that the reason why he was dishonorably discharged was because he was Sikh, and in that process he came under the influence of Bhindranwale, and unfortunately most of the people who were in at the senior ranks of the Indian Army around that time had known Mr. General Shahbeg Singh very well, and they had collaborated with each other, had known each other's intelligence secrets. So it became extremely easy for Shahbeg Singh to train most of the militants in order to how to tackle a state's army, and he was also quite proficient in guerrilla warfare. So making Golden Temple all the more difficult to infiltrate and eventually capture.
Right. So a lot of the strategic fortification are happening because of the knowledge of a very sound and a very refined military mind.
Yes.
You know, you're a major general from the Indian Army who is retired. You probably have 30 plus years of operational experience,
Yes.
and you have a major general as a two-star rank. You have experience interacting with the top brass of the Indian Army, the defense ministry. So that kind of refined experience probably makes these barriers and these fortifications even harder to encroach or
Facts.
move into for the state apparatus of India at the time.
Yes.
So Shabeg Singh is a loyal aide now of Jarnail Singh
General
Bhindranwale.
Singh Bhindranwale. So what they've done is that they have installed heavy machine guns at the two minarets that are there at the Harminder Sahib. Then they have cut out the old medieval marble to install more machine gun places. There are sniping positionings all across the Golden Temple. Now that there are also false ground enclaves where militants were dug in and knew when the Indian forces would come above them, so they used to just jump out of those enclaves and shoot the Indian militants. So because they were jumping out of these ground enclaves, a lot of Indian troops, while they were storming the Golden Temple, sustained a lot of leg injuries. This was mentioned in the book of Mark Tully, which we are going to put in the description, and was also later quoted by Shekhar Gupta in one of his episodes about the Operation Bluestar.
Right. Having said all of this, there was a difficult situation prevailing in the Golden Temple, yet it can be concluded that by and large, by historical evidence, empirical evidence, Operation Blue Star was a poorly conducted operation
I
on
would
the
call it a
part
failure.
of the Indian military.
Yes.
It eliminated Bindranwale, but it only added fuel to the fire.
Yes.
Punjab militancy worsened for the
Worsened after.
next decade or
Yeah.
so. The situation didn't improve till the
Improve at
early
all.
90s.
In fact, after the killing, I'm sorry to interject, after the killing of Bhindranwale, what had happened was that the militants divided themselves in different Panthic communities, and these Panthic communities basically gave out diktats as to what a true Sikh is, and those diktats should have been followed to the core, and if not, the local population faced the brunt of it. So, like, you cannot be a butcher, you cannot drink alcohol, you have to have long hair and beard. In fact, an unshorn hair and a beard was also one of the key ingredients of a khalsa. So
Right.
this was also empirical. And these Panthi communities obviously indulged in violence, guerrilla attacks, tit for tat attacks on different government agencies or pro-government journalists. There were so many attacks on Hindus in general, like Hindus being dragged out of buses and being killed. So this only happened after the
The Blue
Blue
Star.
Star operation, and
There was a very recent Netflix TV special with Randeep Hooda in it. I think it's the only cinematic depiction of something that
yeah, there are a lot of
I'd read
cinematic
of. No,
videos.
no.
Uh,
Then in that scene where a bus is stopped by Khalistan militants and he rounds up people and he says कि कितने हिंदू हैं इस बस में निकलो, and the Hindus are rounded up and shot.
yeah.
That became a prevalent occurrence. Many officers and academicians of the time confirm it, and it was cinematically only represented in this show that many of you might have missed. It's called
Right.
Cat. You may catch it
Yeah.
on
So
Netflix.
after that, you know what happened with Indira Gandhi, and after that, the massacres, and I would like to use the word genocide. The genocide that the Sikhs faced in most of North India at the hands of disparate mobs, which was just support, which was clearly supported by the Congress party around that time. It only made the Sikhs feel more isolated. They felt that first we fled Pakistan, we faced so much violence at the hands of the Pakistanis. Then we come to India, we support the Indian Union. We just ask for autonomy, and we feel that our language is not being given as much respect as other state languages are. And after that, we face the full onslaught of the state in the form of the violence that happened between the Nirankaris and the Damdami Taksal people.
Yeah, I mean, overall,
So
Bluestar was
overall, Bluestar was just a
a
very
big,
tragic event,
a
which
big failure.
which isolated the Sikh
Yeah.
community to such an extent where they felt that certain people of the Sikh community, specifically the Jat Sikhs, where they felt that Khalistan is the only answer.
Led to the assassination of the Prime Minister
Yeah.
herself. Of not so long later, the then Army Chief General Vaidya was
In
assassinated in
Pune.
Pune. So the
The chief
overall,
minister was also assassinated, Beyant Singh, which we
yeah,
discussed in the last episode about PV Narasimha Rao.
yeah, that happened much later. But
In
yeah,
95, yeah.
yeah, those
Yeah,
assassinations happened.
later.
Lieutenant General Brar, who was at the time of the operation a major general, he had assassination attempts on him till as recently as 2012.
Yeah, Julio
So
Ribeiro, who was an IPS officer, who was the DGP of Punjab, he later became the Romanian ambassador, and he also faced an assassination attempt on himself in Romania in 1991.
So, I mean, overall, it created a complicated situation for the Indian state apparatus that it had never seen.
Yeah.
I don't think any other movement caused the loss or assassination or attempts at so many higher government functionaries that a prime minister is assassinated, former army chiefs are
Right.
assassinated, chief ministers are assassinated. So, I
That's a
think
wet dream of Lashkar-e-Toiba. They
it's
could never do that.
on a both you
Yeah.
you isolated the Sikh community,
Yeah.
you furthered the isolation greatly,
Mm-hmm.
you led to massacres of the Sikh community. Many people still haven't recovered from that sense of historical injury.
Mm-hmm.
And on your own end, you suffered losses of higher government functionaries. The Punjab situation worsened for the next decade or so. So I don't really understand what it achieved as much. I think I used to watch interviews of the late KPS Gill about the situation later, and he described that action as, fueling the fires in Punjab a lot more intensely than it already
Absolutely.
was.
In fact, KPS Gill was later involved in Operation Black Thunder or Tornado.
Black Thunder.
Black Thunder? No,
We'll
Black
have
Thunder was 2611. Black Tornado.
we'll have to check
We'll have to
this.
check.
I'm
So Operation. There
Pull your
was.
phone up right now.
Yeah, let's just check it.
You can go on
Yeah,
talking.
so in that operation was curated between the NSG and Punjab Police, and that operation was again done in two parts, like we're doing this episode, part one and part two.
That is a very horrible analogy.
But yeah, so that operation was done in two parts, and again, what
Black Thunder.
Black Thunder? See,
Black Thunder.
Black Tornado.
Black
was
Tornado was
2611.
2611.
Yeah. So anyway, so Operation Black Thunder was the operation where the Indian forces again had to flush out militants from the Golden Temple, where again the militants were given the opportunity to regroup, re-establish their gunning positions. But this time they did not use full military force. They used snipers. They basically used the ancient sieging techniques where the militants were eventually uh, forced to surrender to the forces because no type of resources were reaching them. So you did not have the need to eventually like raid the place where you're compromising your own soldiers and you're compromising so many civilian lives.
Yeah,
Another big
the operation was a lot more well
well
coordinated. It
coordinated,
was
no
it
very less
was
civilian casualties.
it was targeted much better.
Yeah.
It was executed in a much better way. The law enforcement respected the holy site that they
Yeah.
were entering, and overall it hurt very few sentiments.
Yeah.
It detained a lot many more people. It
Militant.
recovered a lot more ammunition.
Yes.
Ammunitions. There are very famous pictures of KPS Gill with I think the picture is intentionally clicked top down because you can see a lot of senior police officers without their footwear. So
Yes.
they're respecting the holy site and inspecting a long line of weapons that have just been recovered from
Recovered
the
from the
site.
site.
So
Yeah, so that's what KPS Gill was trying to say, that why did you have to send in the army? Why did you have to send in the army in such a way that they were eventually forced to use artillery and squash head shells through tanks? Why wasn't it planned like the way he planned Operation Black Thunder? So
yeah,
that was his major criticism. And why was the birth anniversary of Guru Arjan Dev Singh selected as the
as the
date
date.
to raid the
Yeah.
operation, to raid the Golden Temple? Because again, there were so many civilians over there. So was the then government trying to send a message? Is the main question.
Yeah, I think that a lot has to be established about the operational variance in how the army raids its areas and how the police raids it. There is no right or wrong way to do it. There is an operational difference which manifested itself in a certain way. There are records of people who were involved in Bluestar trying to explain their perspective, but I think the situation doesn't change the fact that overall it was a failure.
Yes,
Blue Star is an established policy mess up which worsened the situation manifold.
absolutely.
So that is an overall view of the sense of historical injury
Yes.
and
And
where it took us in the
Sikhs
80s.
history is historically known for assassinating people who've disrespected the Golden Temple.
We are having this deep dive into this conversation because, touch wood, the situation in Punjab in today's day is a lot better. However, there are some historical linkages which have carried on to today's day, and the establishment of those linkages is an objective of our podcast.
Yeah.
So, because we are setting up this two-part series on Punjab, there are issues we need to discuss about the crowding out of a lot of Punjabi youth into foreign countries.
The
Uh,
drug epidemic, which we'll cover in the 90s till now, we'll cover in the next
Yes,
episode.
so the drug
Yeah.
epidemic has to be covered. The degree to which Punjabi farmers are reliant on MSPs, the degree to which water resources are used to grow extremely intensive water intensive crops like paddy, and the inability to for Punjabi farmers to reform out of these crops, and how all those things have driven down Punjab from what it used to be, the number one state in India in terms of per capita GDP, to what it is today, where it I think stands at 13 or 14, I
Yeah.
believe. So the history, the policy complexity, and the present day of Punjab are all related, and the 1990s to the 2020s is something that we will do in our next episode.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for tuning in.
I,
Please like and subscribe.
next episode we'll upload in
Yeah.
in 2-3 days.
Yes, in 2 3 days.
We will
Till
upload.
then,
Yeah,
we will give you time to wrap your heads around this conversation, and please give us feedback if there's
and
anything we can do to improve.
subscribe,
Let us know.
subscribe, please
Thank you.
subscribe. Bye.
Bye bye.